Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is June 2017, and this is the CloudBees OSS team monthly demonstrations of the latest changes. Today, we'll have Bobby Sandell demonstrate the updates for multiple OU support in the LDAP plugin, something that's been asked for quite a while. And we'll have Oleg demonstrate default directories and diagnostic storage on agents to help with obviously diagnostics for that. We were going to have Jesse demonstrate some new CPS changes, but the demonstration's not working right just yet. So we'll get to that next month and show that off then. So for now, I'm going to hand it over to Bobby and take it away, Bobby.
All right. What I've been working on is to enable you to configure multiple different configurations for multiple servers. So if we go to the global security here and enable security, and we go to LDAP, we see sort of the same old configuration screen that we love to hate, with an addition of add server here. Now, in the past, you have been able to sort of fill in multiple servers here in the server field. The difference, though, between this and what you've been doing in the past is that when you've done these two, the schema of your LDAP server needs to be the same between the two. So with the add server now, you can have the same configuration on, or different configuration, I should say, on the two different servers. So for example, on server 2, you might have a different root or a different search filter, like SAM account name, for example. I can't tell, but you have, yeah, so all these settings except for sort of the email resolver and the roles and the cache is what you can fill in here. And this is now released as 1.16 beta 1. And there is a limitation in that beta release, and that is that we're using the server string as a key. Which means that this one needs to be unique between the different configurations. So what is happening when a user logs in is that the first configuration is evaluated, and you can, as usual, you can drag and drop these. So they are evaluated in order. And if the user doesn't exist on the first server, the second server is evaluated. But if the username does exist, but the wrong password, we won't go to the next one. And also, if we have, let's say, 3 server configurations, and there is a problem connecting to the second one, the third one won't be evaluated. And why is that? Well, that is because we want to keep some sort of consistency between the different login attempts. So let's say that user Bobby exists on server 2 and server 3, but they are essentially different users, but they have the same username. If, for example, server 2 was down, so we skip that one, then Bobby on server 3 can log in when he normally couldn't if server 2 was up. So that's because why that limitation is. Now, I'm currently working on as well to enable you to connect to the same server. So I have the same server string here, but sort of recognize the difference in the configuration. So the key that we use to track the users will be based on the server, the root DN, the search base, and the user filter. So if those are different in some ways, the limitation I mentioned with the server name will not be a problem anymore. Yeah, and also for the people that are using a custom, I'm sorry I don't have multiple LDAP servers available at the moment, so I cannot show you it in action. I can only sort of discuss what is going on. But there has been a very old feature in Jenkins where you can provide your own Spring Beam binding to the LDAP plugin. And if you do that, we're sort of not able to know exactly what is going on. So what is happening in that case is that you will see, sorry, I need to reload again. If that one is there, you will sort of get this hint that you cannot sort of add. So if you have a custom Spring binding, it will work just the same as it used to be. Similar, if you don't have a custom Spring binding and you only have one server configured, it will still work as it used to do. But if you have one, we are not allowing you to configure multiple LDAP servers. But just removing that binding or that file in Jenkins Home and that you will then be able to add multiple servers. Okay, so other than that, it should just work. Hopefully by end of this week, early next week, we'll have a new beta version out with the limitation on server name gone. Okay, and I think that's it. If you have any questions, just jump on IRC, and even if you're watching this afterwards, someone is probably there and can answer your questions.
Yeah, thanks for letting that up, Bobby. That's on Freenode at #Jenkins for that. So let me switch over to Oleg. Oleg, you're on mute, just so you know. Are you ready to present?
Yes, I'm ready. Sorry, got lost in Windows. So I'm sharing my screen. Okay. Do you see it?
Yep. Presenting to everyone.
Yeah. So I'm going to briefly demo remoting work directories and the related changes in logging and remoting by default. So if you do not mind, I'll spend a couple of minutes to provide a brief introduction into the issue area, because it's not that explicit. So I suppose everybody knows what is remoting. It's actually a communication layer which connects Jenkins agents and master. And for example, slave jar, which you may see on agents, is just a renamed version of remoting jar. And actually, this library is one of the key success factors of Jenkins, but it's also one of the point of failures. For example, if you have network connectivity issues, etc. And actually, in my humble opinion, there are several main issues in remoting itself. So if you are interested about details, I had a presentation at Days of Jenkins. Here's a link above. But generally, I think that several major issues are, firstly, dependency on the TCP communication layer. When TCP breaks, remoting breaks as well. Then there were runaway processes in Windows. There were issues with outdated remoting versions on agents. And the issue I'm going to talk about today is no logging by default. So if you have seen our previous OSS team demos, in April 2017, I was demoing the Windows stuff. You can find this recording on CloudBees TV. It's a channel where we have all the demos. And as I said, today I'm going to concentrate on no logging by default. So it's one of the ongoing activities. Now we work on several things in remoting area in parallel. Firstly, it's better stability and diagnosticability, and the stuff for logging. So what's the idea behind it? When a remoting issue happens, we commonly need some basic information in order to troubleshoot the issues. Firstly, it's just Jenkins core version logs from Jenkins master, but we also need some information from agent side. For example, agent connection logs, stack dumps if something hangs, and of course, the remote version itself. This information can be collected by Jenkins plugins, for example, by support core plugin. So when we need the information, we can just gather it from the instance. But the problem is with remoting connectivity issues. When a remoting connection fails, we cannot retrieve information from the agent side due to obvious reason. We have no channel which allows retrieving it. So when agent fails, we expect the data to be somehow available on the agent side, and here's the problem. By default, common agent types do not perform logging. For example, if you launch a SSH agent, you won't see logging on the disk. You will see it only in a standard output, which has been forwarded to the master side. So if connection breaks, you won't see any logs on the disk by default. And the situation is pretty same for GNLP agents. In a Windows service wrapper, we have a feature which enables this logging. So effectively now, only in Windows services, you get these logs by default. If you want to enable logging on other agent types, actually there are several solutions. One of the solutions is to use slave log parameter, which is available in remoting command line arguments. Another way is to forward std out and std error like we do, for example, for SSH agents. You can see suffix parameter when you select a proper launcher in Jenkins. It allows to forward logs as well. And actually, there is another non-documented approach for Java util logging, where you can enable logging by customizing settings of the logging engine in remoting. The problem is that all these ways require some customization for the agents, and actually it means that once we see the issue, we need to enable logging if it hasn't been enabled by default. For example, it's a common case in issues being reported to Jenkins Jira. Actually, we want to have something on disk by default, which would allow us to retrieve this information when something goes wrong. And due to this, we need information somehow being recorded by remoting by default. And here's the problem. The current implementation of remoting had no work directory support. So when you specify a root directory for the agent, this agent workspace appears only when Jenkins connects to the agent. So it means that before we connect, we see no data on the disk at all. And it means that remoting doesn't know where to store this data. And this is the background of the changes we are doing. And actually, I'm going to demo the work directory support, which is going to be enabled in one of the next weekly releases. So let me show you the demo first. Okay, so I'm going to the terminal. This demo won't include so many user interface things, but yeah, as it says designed. So I'm going to start remoting agent. As any other Java applications, yeah, it's slave jar. So okay. If I, yeah.
Can you make your font in your terminal one to bigger?
Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better. Oh, there you go.
Okay. So I thought it was enough. So if I click on the, if I launch it with -v flag, actually it's just an unsupported option, we get help for slave jar. And you may see many options there, and actually these options are not available via Jenkins web interface, but when you launch remoting via CLI, you can see this option. And here we see new option called work directory. Actually, this is an opt-in behavior which allows to enable this work directory in remoting. Let me show what happens. So I'm going to connect my agent. Here, agent startup flags. So effectively, I just start with common parameters like GNLP URL, like secret, and also work directory, which is a new parameter. If we go to the web interface of Jenkins, you may see that there is no work directory parameter offered by default. So just a second, I'll open the page. Yeah, here's our agent one, and here's a default command line. So when we release the stuff, there will be also work directory parameter offered here. But by now we have to specify it from CLI. And actually, I'm going to just run this agent. So it's something like, okay, agent 1sh. So right now there is no directory created, so it will be something new. And let's do it. Okay, so we see that the agent has been connected, and here we can see some additional information. For example, using whatever path as a remoting work directory. So actually it means that remoting has started in the mode which enables work directory, and we have a basic structure initialized on the disk. So if I go to the disk structure, here's our agent one directory. And what we can see here, there is a jar cache folder. Actually, it was a long time feature request. So by default, jar cache used to be created in Jenkins home directory, which wasn't very convenient for system installations where home directory was mapped from shared directories. So now we can isolate it. And we also see logs directory, where we can see that there are some logs printed by default. So effectively, when we enable parameter, remoting automatically creates the structure and starts writing logs with log rotation. And also you can get more diagnostics information, for example, if you install support core plugin in this directory. And in addition, it offers extra diagnosability features. For example, let's remove this directory. And yeah, let's start this agent without workspace. But for example, let's create a directory which is not actually writable for our user. So CloudBees agent one. And here I just remove the write permission to the directory. So now when I start remoting without workspace mode, actually you may see that the agent connects successfully. You may be surprised, but actually it's a default behavior of Jenkins setups now. So when we have no workspace specified, since remoting doesn't care about whatever working directory, it connects. And then agent just starts working. And in the Jenkins UI, we cannot see that we cannot actually write something. And actually, this agent has been indicated as fully writable and fully accessible. And if we try to run a job, we may see that the job fails. And it fails just because we cannot create the directory for it, which is an expected behavior. But the problem is that the node is being considered as online, so nothing is going to happen with it. whatever we do, if we have periodic builds, or if we have an aginator plugin which restarts the build or whatever, we will be still scheduling builds to this agent until somebody manually discovers what's the cause of the issue and disables the agent. Before that, all our builds will be failing. So when we do the same with Workspace, actually now we have default diagnostics, which checks that the directory is writable and that the directory is executable. So when I launch it, the remoting startup just fails because the specified working directory should be fully accessible, which is expected behavior. This check is enabled by default when you use work directories, but actually there is also another case. Suppose you map workspace directories from a shared directory. So for example, by mount command. If due to whatever reason mount command doesn't work, the default remoting version will be still able to automatically create a path. So even if the directory isn't mapped, for example, remoting work directory, when we launch the default agent, the directory structure will be created on the local disk. So instead of getting the expected work directory for remoting on shared directory, you will be running something local. In order to prevent this behavior, we have another flag called check workspace directory, if I recall correctly. Let me show you it. Yes, so there is fail if work directory is a missing flag. And actually this flag allows to prevent such cases. So whenever we launch remoting, we will be checking that the directory really exists, and it will allow to prevent such crashes if something goes wrong with our infrastructure. So this feature is also available when you enable work directories. Without it, there is no opportunity to check the status of these directories. Let's go back to logging. As I said, we have logging by default. This is good, but actually, as a developer, you may want to configure your own remoting, all your own logging features. So let's just enable our agent again. And yes, I've started the agent. Now we see the logs here. Probably the default logging is good enough, but we do not receive, for example, debug information because the default logging level is info. So if something goes really wrong, we do not get information, debug information for it. Another use case is that, where, for example, you want to redirect these logs to syslog in order to integrate them with your own monitoring systems or own remote logging systems. In such case, it's possible to use default Java util logging appenders. As I said before, this functionality was available in remoting for a long time, but actually it wasn't documented. Now with remoting 3.8, it's been officially supported. So if we go to remoting repository, you may see that there are two new entries. The first one is work directory. Actually, it's what I have demoed before. And another one is about logging. And in logging, you have several configuration options. One is the legacy behavior with agent log and slave log. But in new version of remoting, I would consider these options as a deprecated behavior. But now, starting from remoting 3.8, you also get opportunity to configure the stuff using Java util configuration file or also via additional parameter. So if you go back to CLI, parameter called login config file, and actually it points to the standard Java util login property file. So here's an example of this file. You can define your list of log handlers. You can define define a custom formatting, custom logging levels, and actually this file is extensible, so you can attach your own libraries and connect remoting logging to your systems. Use this file together with remoting. For example, let me show you how it works. I have a wrapper in my startup script because actually I'm too lazy to write this entire string. But actually, I just pass Java parameters before I start the command. So let's define our login properties file and the startup command. So -d Java util login config file, and then our login properties file. Oh, sorry. Okay, and let's start remoting again. So what does happen? As you may see, I have configured this file to use a different logging for console. It's common as the out as the error, and for file logging. So by default, we get another logging enabled. And we may see that there is logging being printed to console, similar logs as we had before. And there is also agent1 log txt, which includes more data by default. So there are additional diagnostics information for match items, for example, messages we receive in remoting, additional retrieval of information from TCP agent, listing it, including call metadata, etc. And you can configure this logging using fine-grained definitions. But now I just enabled fine logging for the entire system. Actually, what happens with it is that once we enable this logging, we override settings for the work directory logging. So here you may see this file, but actually this is a file from the previous launch, and all new logging happens according to the configuration we specify in the property file. So it means that you can customize your logging settings as much as you want, and you get common support for it. So it's not a custom implementation for remoting, it's just a standard Java util logging engine. For the longer term perspective, it would be great to integrate the stuff with Java, with Log4j or other such more extensive engine, but for common cases, it should resolve the problem. So are there any questions so far? Let me check. Okay, so I don't see any questions. I'll just briefly talk about what's going to happen. As I said, it's a kind of work in progress activity. So the current state is that we have enabled remoting work directory concept in remoting, but we still need to enable it by default in all types, for example, in Windows services, in Java Web Start, in GNLP configurations also, and other changes need to be done for Docker packages, etc. So it's a kind of long story which includes much changes, but we've done the basement work, and I hope that all other fixes will land by the next LTS baseline in September. So if you want to try it now, you can download a custom remoting version from Jenkins Artifactory. You can replace this agent version on your agents, and then you can enable this work directory right now. Changes in Jenkins core in order to enable this functionality. And if you need more information about work directories and about other stuff, so there is a GitHub repository for remoting with all documentation. I try to extend it when possible. There are also some slides for remoting troubleshooting. You can also find the links to other presentations on the remoting documentation page. So if you scroll down, there is more info links, and actually there will be more links later. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. And yes, we can discuss the implementation approach and your concerns about work directories. Any feedback will be appreciated. So that's all from me.
Okay. Thanks, Oleg. And just a reminder, if you're watching this anytime in the future on recording, that you can jump into IRC, and most likely somebody will be around that can answer any questions on that if Oleg and Bobby aren't there themselves. So thanks for joining today, and we'll be back next month, and we'll probably pick up with the new groovy stuff from Jesse and a few other things in July. So thanks a lot, and enjoy the rest of your day.